Chapter 30. Surrender. Vilmos strode towards the battle, with hordes of wolves streaming out behind him, like a dense living cloak. May I strike terror in every living soul, he thought, feeling the gaze of two armies turning towards him. The wolves stayed behind their master, enslaved by his magic. Vilmos moved with the same swift grace as the wolves themselves. His face was distorted by the inhuman additions of fur and fangs, and he wore a smug expression of twisted glory. "Look at me now," he shouted. "Look at the poor executioner's son. Now I am a great magician. Command all the wolves of the realm." A wolf snapped in his left hand, and he began chanting special incantations in one long, continuous stream. As he sang his menacing song, his eyes sought out King Harman. "I'll have you eating out of my hand. I'll have you begging on your knees, my old enemy," Vilmos thought with relish. "Maybe I'll make you watch me marry Chloe before you die. Then we'll see truly who is the stronger." Harman's tactics had been working, but unexpectedly the lines began breaking up and dissolving into chaos. Only moments earlier his cavalry had almost wiped out the right flank of the enemy, and he had allowed himself a moment of hope. The battle had been turning in their favour. But now the battleground was full of dark, agile bodies leaping and great toothy jaws snapping. Harman gaped in disbelief. They were being overrun by wolves. The shock of his soldiers rapidly gave way to shouts of fear as hundreds of overgrown, snarling wolves came towards them, baying and gnashing their teeth. "Reform the line!" Harman roared, but the marauding creatures were already among them. The king's heart quailed. Was this the end? Forming a line of defence seemed impossible. The warrior king slashed his sword wildly at the wolves snapping at his legs and leaping up Skylock's sides. The stallion reared in fright, and the king held on for dear life. He had fought ogres before, but never forest creatures with a deathly glaze in their eyes. Grim-faced, Harman listened to the Pavilion soldiers giving whooping cries of exultation. Victory would be theirs now. They were sure of it. Irina could watch no longer. She withdrew abruptly from the window, turning to curtsy to her mother. "You've forbidden me to ride out against men, but you've said nothing of wolves. Forgive me." Before her mother could order her to stop, Irina fled, hurrying down the staircases, almost falling over in her haste. She ran along the corridor that led to the stables. Amicus followed, flying down to her shoulder. "Robin," she cried, "bring Adriel." Adriel trotted out from the shadowy stalls, brushed and glossy as a sea pearl, and saddled, just as she had asked. The mare's eyes shone with eagerness. Irina put her foot into the stirrup and leapt into the saddle. "Thank you, Robin," she said. "Here, your highness," he said, handing her a bow and a quiver full of arrows. "I've heard rumours you're a fine archer." "Heard rumours? From whom?" Octavia stepped forward from where she had been waiting. "I knew you would be here sooner or later," she said. "I don't want you unprotected. Take this shield." "It's too heavy," said Irina, handing it back. "Truth is my shield, remember? Look after Amicus. The battlefield is no place for a Sylvan." Octavia scooped the bird from the girl's shoulder. Irina rode out from the stables, through the castle gates, and along the main street. Adriel's back rippled with muscles as she cantered over the cobblestones. Before long they reached the city's outskirts. Veering northeast, they left the road and sped across the plains towards the battleground. "May Jun protect us now," Irina cried, leaning forward on the horse's neck, her gut churning with fear. As they approached, Irina winced at the swords clashing and men shouting. Worst of all, she could hear the ferocious noises made by the wolves as they attacked. Up close, the battle was even more terrifying than she had imagined. She caught sight of King Harman in his feathered helmet, his sword drawn and catching the sun. She saw William further afield. Her royal father and her farm father were fighting side by side. What if she saw Torg, her wolf father, among the wolves? Casting aside this dreadful thought, she urged Adriel into the fray, her ears full of the clamour of weapons and cries as men tried in vain to overpower the wolves, who were fighting to kill with no thought of eating. They were swollen and savage and mad with bloodlust. For Irina, who loved the wolves, it was a sickening sight. What has Vilmos done to them, she wondered, trying not to panic. He's made them cruel. That was when she saw the magician. Beside him was Sealy, the hugest wolf of all, baring his teeth. Irina gasped in recognition. "No!" she cried. She knew this wolf. It was Durell. Involuntary tears of horror came to her eyes as she saw the evidence of killing all over him. There was no mistaking Durell, despite his grotesque appearance. She recognized the markings of his pelt, the glittering brightness of his eyes, so like Sheka's, her childhood companion, her wolf brother. Would he recognize her now? If he smelled her, would he remember their friendship? The bond that was once so strong between them. Perhaps she could make him remember, if only she could get him to look her way, to hear her voice. But how on earth would she break the enchantment that held him? "What is she going to do? Is she going to fight?" said Mihaela, watching her sister from the castle window. Octavia was beside her with Amicus on her shoulder. "I can't bear it, don't tell me," wept Chloe, her hands over her eyes. "My father is riding toward her," said Mihaela, ignoring her mother's plea. "He stopped. Irina is getting off her horse." "Getting off her horse? Why, for pity's sake?" "She will surely be killed," cried Chloe, digging her fingernails into her forehead. King Harman pulled his sword from a wolf's belly. Swinging his horse around, ready to kill another, he saw the bright figure of Irina on Adriel, the crooked crown flashing atop her scruffy bunches of hair. He galloped towards her, his thoughts racing. She had disobeyed him. She was endangering herself and the battle. Irina dismounted from Adriel and stood beside the mare, holding the bridle, her lips moving. "What's she doing now?" Harman muttered through clenched teeth. His daughter looked up and saw him. There was no fear or madness on her face. She called to him, "Please, father, please, keep your soldiers back, away from me." "Go back to your mother," Harman thundered. "This is a battlefield." Irina shook her head and shrugged, as if to say the king had misunderstood her. Frightened for her life, Harman shouted a command to the nearest soldiers to form a half circle around Irina to defend her. Vilmos and the great wolf approached. When Vilmos saw the girl standing on the battlefield, his mouth opened in amazement. Harman must be desperate, he thought. He's bringing girl soldiers to fight. Then he saw the crown that Irina had pinned into her hair. He noticed how still she seemed in the fury of the fighting around her. When their eyes met, Vilmos knew it was Irina. So the rumours are true, he thought, gazing at her malevolently. The baby I left for dead has, by some miracle, survived. Vilmos was filled with unthinkable rage. He felt it rising from his stomach and into his throat like a cloud of moths. Fear turned in Irina. She saw the hatred on Vilmos's hairy, distorted face. This is the end, she said to herself. If I must die, let it be by Durell. Vilmos chanted to the wolf, whose hackles rose as he paced forward. The other wolves sensed the change in their leader, and they too drew near Irina. The princess turned briefly toward Harmon again and called in a clear, penetrating voice, "Do not harm the wolf." Quietly, Irina began to sing. It was the song the birds had taught her long before she had words. It was the song she had sung to calm Durell when he'd been caught in the net and she'd untangled it with her patient, childish hands. Even as she trembled with fear, her voice grew, pure and tender, rising above the clash of iron swords. In that corner of the battleground, the forces of combat broke. Into her song she poured her love for Durell, along with her anguish at what he'd become under the magician's power. Her voice was both the desolate cry of a bird and as soothing as a lullaby. It was unlike any song anyone had heard before. Durell heard the song through the hazy layers of poison travelling through his veins. He recognized Irina's familiar smell. The hulking brute moved forward eagerly. Vilmos sensed the savagery leaving the wolf, and this frightened him. The magician chanted his spell more loudly. In the wolf's ears, Vilmos's magic mixed with the beloved voice of Irina. Durell was only a few feet away from her. His hackles had dropped, and he seemed ready to lie down at her feet. In desperation, Vilmos issued his strongest command. A single word, like a slap, broke Irina's song, such was its violence and power. The wolf had to obey. "Slay her," cried the magician. Durell leapt, fangs bared and snapping, and would have forced Irina to the ground, but she was ready for him. She tumbled nimbly to one side as they used to do as pups. Durell nipped her ear as she fell. He snarled and stood very still as he sniffed her again. Who was this human who behaved like a wolf? Why did she smell like home? Irina rolled onto her knees, breathing hard, holding her hand up to stop any soldier coming to her aid. She knew what she must do. Blood dripped from her ear. Kneeling before Durell, she bowed her head and pulled her hair to one side, offering her bare neck to the wolf. "Kill me if you dare," she whispered. There was an audible gasp from Harmon and his men, but Irina and the wolf ignored it. They were deep in a place of their own, the wolfish world of Irina's childhood. Her bare neck was like a white flag, her bowed head a gesture of surrender. Irina was speaking to him in the way of the wolves. It was written into his deepest nature, far deeper than Vilmos's evil magic. With a whimper, Durell turned away. The spell was broken. Vilmos had lost control, losing power over the pack leader meant that he had lost power over all the wolves. Shrieking with fury, he struck a soldier down from his horse, grabbed the reins, swung himself into the saddle, and galloped towards the forest. "Not this time," shouted Harmon, charging after him with a band of soldiers. Arrows rained down on the figure of Vilmos, yet onwards he galloped until he had vanished among the trees.